Updates on West Asia crisis. Now, the United States and Iran have agreed to de-escalate tensions, with both sides standing down on potential strikes and allowing vessels to move freely in regional waters. A U.S. official confirmed on Sunday that technical talks will continue on all aspects of the Memorandum of Understanding. The official stated that technical talks are slated to continue on all areas of the MOU. He also added that both sides will stand down for now. The development signals a temporary pause on attacks from both sides as diplomatic efforts aim to resolve remaining issues through sustained negotiations. And Iran has issued a fresh warning to international ships not to bypass its designated routes in the Strait of Hormuz. The directive comes shortly after the US and Iran agreed to stand down on strikes and allow vessels to move freely while technical talks on their Memorandum of Understanding continue. The move signals Tehran's insistence on maintaining control over navigation in the strategic waterway despite the de-escalation understanding announced on Sunday. Shipping companies have been urged to adhere strictly to Iran's chosen paths to avoid potential confrontations as diplomatic negotiations proceed on broader issues. Meanwhile, flights between Tehran and Dubai are set to resume on Monday, marking the reopening of a key air route weeks after the two countries were affected by the wider West Asia conflict. Iranian state TV and other media quoted the head of Tehran's Imam Khomeini Airport as saying that the necessary arrangements have been made to reopen the Tehran-Dubai route at Imam Khomeini Airport. Tickets for a Monday morning flight operated by Iranian airline Ceasefire were available for purchase, with the aircraft scheduled to depart Tehran at 10:40 a.m. local time. The resumption comes after Dubai's aviation sector faced repeated disruptions during the conflict when the airport was targeted by drone attacks and temporarily suspended operations on several occasions. Now, the Israeli military destroyed a 200-meter underground tunnel used by Hezbollah in the southern Lebanese village of Majdal Zun, as per the Israeli Prime Minister and Defense Minister on Sunday. The tunnel contained hundreds of weapons and launchers. The U.S. was notified prior to the strike. The operation occurred 2 days after a U.S. brokered security arrangement aimed at easing border hostilities, which includes phased Israeli withdrawal and Lebanese army deployment. Israel said it plans to maintain forces in an expanded security zone, and Hezbollah condemned the attack as a flagrant ceasefire violation, while its leader rejected the deal as surrender. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said that Israel will continue eliminating terrorist threats. Meanwhile, an Israeli soldier was killed in combat in southern Lebanon on Sunday, just 2 days after Israel and Lebanon signed a U.S. brokered agreement to end the hostilities. 21-year-old Captain David Hazard, a platoon commander, died after troops encountered a Hezbollah fighter in a suspicious structure near Doordarshan. Another soldier was injured in the clash as Israeli forces subsequently located and eliminated the Hezbollah terrorist. The Lebanese state news agency reported fresh Israeli strikes on the outskirts of Doordarshan and Tabeh. Hazard's death brings Israeli military losses to 38 soldiers and 1 civilian contractor since the conflict with Hezbollah erupted in early March. All right, Jessica Taneja has more information on this. She is joining us live from New Delhi. Hi, Jessica. Both sides have agreed to stand down on potential strikes while technical talks continue. Talks will be held in Qatar tomorrow, that is Tuesday. What does this indicate about the current diplomatic engagement between Washington and Tehran?
Well, you saw last week there was exchange of fire. The fragile ceasefire stood at a point where it almost threatened the peace deal that is yet to be discussed and finalized. A framework, a memorandum of understanding was signed in Marseille. And after that, technical talks are due for the next 60 days. And with that exchange of fire, it did seem to indicate that things would not sort of ease out at this point in time. But as we're given to understand, those technical talks would continue. The 14-point agenda, which includes everything from the nuclear issue, from uranium enrichment, to opening the Strait of Hormuz, and also including bilateral relations, what the Strait of Hormuz would be in terms of the ships that are able to transit all of those discussions were due to take place. While there has been some limited understanding on what this was going to be, but strikes and counter-strikes specifically on Bahrain and Kuwait, Bahrain being the home to Fifth Fleet, has created enormous outcry from the United States. You also heard from the President of the United States last week. He had put out a post on Truth Social saying that they will attack Iran, and they had, in fact, struck some communication facilities, and that is what in the retaliation we saw Iranian drones targeted towards Bahrain and Kuwait. And that led to certain tensions, for a brief moment as to where this fragile ceasefire stands and what kind of understanding have the two sides come to after what we saw in the recent past and the discussions that took place after that, the peace deal announcement in Switzerland and then, in France, and then, those discussions going on in Switzerland. So, of course, there is a lot that rests on this, especially when it comes to, the kind of temperament that has been maintained between the two in terms of allowing the talks to continue. There should be a diplomatic thaw that we saw, but diplomacy continues to do its work is what the expectation is not just from the United States and the Iranian side, but for the rest of the world, which is currently dealing with a massive crisis because of the closure of Strait of Hormuz, Abhishek.
Yeah. Jessica, yes, even as the de-escalation understanding is in place, Iran has issued fresh navigation directives in the Strait of Hormuz. What more details do you have on this?
See, there are concerns about mines in the Strait of Hormuz, and also you saw a Panama flagged container carrying 2 million barrels of oil was struck, and that drew widespread condemnation from not just the regional partners and the Gulf states, but from many countries across the world. Because look at the traffic at the Strait of Hormuz. Pre-war, it was 130 ships, and after this conflict, which began on February 28, has been reduced to just 20 ships exiting the Strait of Hormuz. And then the discussion also rests on what exactly would be the transiting position. And if you hear from the Iranian side, Abbas Araghchi, the foreign minister, had categorically stated that they will be getting into discussions and they will ensure that the pre-war traffic returns, so that that energy chokehold that has been sort of, keeping the world at, very, very worried about critical energy supplies, because it's not just oil, it's also about gas that comes in from the Gulf states. And a lot of countries, especially in South Asia and elsewhere, are dependent on it. And with the pre-war conditions not returning immediately, it does raise questions as to what the state would be and how safe would ships be, and not just for oil traffic, but also for commercial shipment. That's another concern, because there's a lot of discussion that needs to take place. Because if you look at the 60-day agreement announced by President Donald Trump, it had categorically stated that the ships would be allowed to pass without any transit fee, without any fear, without any threat or rapid escalation of violence or any kind of drone strikes. But with the recent incident, it has given some concern, and already the pre-war traffic is quite slow. So it does raise concern to the effect that whether these discussions would lead to something which would effectively bring an outcome where these ships are allowed a safe passage, because that is where the concern for most countries is. But we do have assurances from the Iranian foreign minister, but he also said that the discussions will continue with the Sultanate of Oman, because it also is an important regional partner and a country that has been involved in these negotiations for quite some time, from the very beginning to de-escalation to now, opening the safe passage for ships to pass through. So there have been guarantees, but these small incidents time and again have threatened peace. And with peace, it has also threatened trade. And this on again, off again diplomacy seems to not just confusing the rest of the world, but also not giving a clear idea as to what lies ahead, Abhishek.
All right, Jessica, we'll leave it at that. Thank you for your inputs.